You're a Jerseyman. You were educated at Lemoy, then the Kenaway, and then Holyoke. What made you come back to be part of the Electoral Commission? Why did you do that?
Jersey is my home ultimately, and I think I saw an opportunity to contribute something. I was kind of dimly aware that there was a lot of debate going on around the question of electoral reform, and I thought that as somebody who was working in Britain, that I was perhaps able to bring a slightly more objective eye to the debate, and bring a sort of that more impartial point of view, and also sort of combine, if you know, you hope, the best of both worlds, the view of somebody who's lived a lot of time out of the island, but somebody who's nevertheless been brought up with Jersey traditions in their blood.
Having spent all those hours and days working on the Electoral Commission, listening to over 250 submissions, what's your conclusion of the best way in which Jersey should go forward?
I think it became quite clear to me as we listened to the arguments that only option A really offered a positive way forward for the island. Option C obviously keeps things as they are, and I think it was very quickly apparent, and in fact the whole business of setting up an electoral commission implies that the status quo is not a good option. There is a genuine desire for change, I think, across a very broad spectrum. So there's a desire for change and a need for change, and so then the question is, well, what kind of change? And I think you've got to start from your first principles and think, well, what should an electoral system look like? What should it achieve? And I think the fundamental thing it should achieve it should try and encourage as many people as possible to participate. And I think you can only do that if you give people equality. The basic principle of any electoral system is fairness. Everybody's vote should count for the same. And if you don't have that, then you have a situation where people are going to feel aggrieved, and they're going to feel bitter and cynical about the system because they know that ultimately their voice isn't heard as loudly as other people's voices. And that's, I think, very corrosive for democracy. And I think it's something that I think bedevils politics on the island. And I think if you want to look at why it is that voter turnout is low, why there's so much anger expressed a lot of the time in political debate here, I think you've got to look at that first basic principle, that people know that their voices are not heard. And until you address that, I don't think you can really move forward.
When did you reach your decision on the Commission that option A was the right way to go?
I can't put a date on when I came to the actual decision that option A was the right one. I think it was an evolution as I heard the arguments. I think there were some clearly very powerful submissions in favour of option A, and I couldn't find in all the arguments for option B, I couldn't find the compelling reasoning that would persuade me that was the right way to go. I don't see how, if you have a system that's unfair and biased, that the answer to improving it is to make it more unfair and more biased.
Which is what
option B does. And so I think you have to look at option A, which at last gives people the chance to have an equal say in their own future.
Did you find that it was difficult on the Commission, once you'd reached that view about option A, in the arguments that you would have to try and persuade the Commission that that was the right way to go?
I think the decision we took on the Commission, which I fully back, is that the arguments about whether or not the constables should be in the States, which is essentially the argument between option A and option B, that this is an argument where there are two sides to the argument that are very powerfully held by each side, and that the best way to decide that is through a referendum. And
we found in the discussions that we've had and with the public meetings that have been held that the view is constantly expressed that option B retains the parish system. If you take the constables away, the whole honorary police, the whole honorary system is going to collapse. I wondered what your view is about that.
I think it seems to me that a lot of the arguments for option B fall apart when you examine them. It's being said that somehow removing the constable's automatic right to sit in the States will lead to the collapse of the parish system. Well, why? The constables aren't being abolished, the parishes aren't being abolished, no functions are being taken away from the parishes. Why would removing their automatic right to sit in the States lead to the whole edifice crumbling down? It would strike me that if something just removing the constables out of the States brings the edifice crumbling down, it must be quite a weak edifice. I actually don't think it is. I think it's a strong edifice, and I think it will continue regardless of whether constables are in the States.
Yes, the Constable of St Heliers, in fact, has already expressed that view, which is precisely that there's no evidence at all to illustrate, and common sense is that it can't possibly happen. But it's very strong. It's a very strongly held view in the country.
You hear arguments that somehow the constables will lose influence if they're no longer automatically in the States. I really think this is for the birds. I mean, the idea that elected politicians are going to stop picking up the phone or meeting with constables simply because they don't have a seat in the States is just a nonsense, surely. I mean, in the end, every deputy, which is what we'll have if option A gets passed, needs to get re-elected. If they're seen to be ignoring the views of large swathes of their parishioners as represented by constables, then they won't get elected, and they know that. And similarly, ministers aren't going to stop meeting with constables simply because they're not in the States.
In fact, in St Heliers for years, it's been a tradition or a right of the deputies to meet their constable once a month, which happens in this very room. Yeah. So there's the proof that of what you're saying, that it's not going to be like that.
I think that the supporters of option B have to answer one fundamental question, which is, what do you have to say to the people whose votes count for less under option B than they will do under option A? What is your argument for saying that somebody in St Heliers or St Brillard or St Saviour, St Clement, that your vote, sorry folks, your vote shouldn't count for as much as somebody who lives in a rural parish? Why is that a good thing? And I really would like the people in option B to explain how they justify that.
In fact, the Commission actually states that option B would be almost the worst possible result you could have. And I presume that's your view too.
I think the reason why I think it's important to have option B as a vote is, I think this, on the ballot paper, is I think you have to settle these big constitutional issues through a vote. I don't think you can settle it through a commission just deciding amongst 6 people which one should go forward. I think it's right and proper that the people of Jersey should have that choice. I very much hope that they choose on the basis of fairness and equality, and I trust that the people in Jersey have that instinct in them. And I hope that that's what will prevail.
Thank you.
Johnathan, one question. Someone said to me, you were on the Electoral Commission. Why are you speaking out now? Shouldn't you remain impartial?
I think the point about the Electoral Commission is that it costs quite a lot of money. Taxpayers stumped up a reasonable amount of money for an Electoral Commission, and the job of the Commission was to examine the issues as impartially as possible and come to some conclusions. Now, it would seem odd to me that, having spent that money, spent that time, that somebody should then turn around and say, whoops, we don't actually want you to tell anyone what you thought. That doesn't sound like good value for money to me, for the Jersey taxpayer.
Is there a personal motivation behind wanting to speak out? Well, in the sense that, you feel yourself a Jerseyman.
I think the motivation for speaking out is that, having spent a good portion of a year examining all of this, and feeling that the future of Jersey is in some sense at stake. I think these decisions only come round once not even every generation. The last reform was in the 1940s. It's once every several generations. It's nice to have a feeling that if you believe something passionately, that you've tried to influence that. I think it's all you can do in a democracy, isn't it?
There are those out there in the island who are saying, I can't be bothered, I'm not going to vote because I can't have any influence. I wonder if you've got a message for them to send out to them.
I think the point about a referendum like this is that it doesn't come along often, the chance to define the whole system, the whole underlying basis of your democracy.
It's a once in a lifetime.
It's a once in a lifetime, really. And I think what a shame to miss that opportunity to have a say, all for the sake of, it looks a bit confusing. There's leaflets out there, there's plenty of literature. It doesn't take too long to try and get to the bottom of it. And at root, it's really very simple. I mean, if you support option A, you're supporting it because you believe that the electoral system should be based on fairness and equality, and that everybody's vote should count for the same. And that's a very simple and easy to understand principle.
What's interesting is, of course, this was a reform commission, and if you look up the word reform in the dictionary, it says to improve things, to make them better. And I wonder how people in option B and option C regard that definition of reform, which is the proper definition.
It will be interesting to hear, won't it?
We put the question, but we don't get an answer.
Okay.